The first point is that when we are talking about any kind of climate altering technologies, whether over land or over the oceans, we are really in a very messy world of global geopolitics, but also in a rarefied world of climate science. And climate altering technologies are occupying both these worlds. And currently, we don't have any kind of governance structure or arrangement or institutional framework that allows us to, on one hand, look at the risks of not acting significantly against the risk of climate change, and on the other hand, the risks of acting against the risks of climate change, but the risks associated with climate altering technologies. The second point I therefore wanted to make is whether we should be considering any kind of governance or regulation at all. The interventions we are trying to at least conduct research on have that planetary impact. But on the other hand, the governance is fragmented or regional or sub-regional or just national. Again, creates a messy situation where there is dissonance between where the science is headed and where governance is catching up or not. Which brings me to my third point. So the question is, any kind of climate altering technologies that might, say, happen over the open oceans, that happens to be surrounded by littoral states that are developing countries, raises several types of governance issues. First is, who is likely to be conducting any kind of research or field experiment or even deployment of climate altering technologies, whether it's marine cloud brightening to increase albedo, or it's ocean ion fertilization to increase the absorption of carbon dioxide. Who is likely to be doing that? Now, developing countries, by definition, might not have the financial resources to be doing that. They're likely to have, in certain contexts at least, some of the technical resources or the scientific basis or some degree of scientific capability. But they might not be able to do this unilaterally, which means you're bringing in actors that don't belong to the littoral region of the Indian Ocean. That then raises the question, if any kind of activity were to be undertaken, how do we attribute the consequences, whether good or bad, to that activity? Do we have sufficient information? Is there a mechanism by which those actions are reviewed in advance, are reviewed post hoc? And how do we govern the ungoverned? Because the oceans largely, outside of the exclusive economic zones that each country is entitled to, the oceans are largely ungoverned. Which brings me to my fourth point. Particularly in certain oceanic structures, we have very limited governance. Some of the work that my colleagues at the Council of Energy, Environment, and Water have been doing demonstrate that there is a significant difference between the kind of ocean-related governance structures that exist over the Atlantic Ocean. By our count, about 50-odd policies exist relating to all sorts of things, effluent discharge, oil spills, and so forth, compared to the Indian Ocean, where it's about 10 or under. So you are talking about a region which has primarily developed countries, but you also are talking about an ocean which has very little governance arrangements, even compared to other oceanic regions. Therefore, I come to my fifth point. If we were to contemplate any kind of climate altering technologies, whether it's carbon dioxide removal, also the radiation management over the oceans, I would recommend that we have to consider at least two kinds of governance arrangements. One kind of governance arrangement associated with transparency, and another kind of governance arrangement associated with international research collaboration. We need to move beyond very limited information on what's going on, or very limited self-reporting by groups of scientists, to at least some degree of national reporting on any kind of intended climate altering research that is being undertaken, and at least eventually international assessments of that science. The second part is the issue of international research, coordinated research, where I would recommend that we need to pool resources across countries, look at flexible funding, cash and in kind, consider the liability and responsibility rules, consider the intellectual property rules, and as well as think of the broader institutional framework within which this would happen.